Okay, here we go. Okay, so, Grandpa,
Yes.
what's your name?
Uh, Philip Heron is my
Okay.
name.
And so where did you grow up?
Well, in Oakland, Berkeley. Oakland, I guess,
Um,
mostly.
and what were like the years that you were growing up? Like what time was that?
What time was it?
Yeah, was it the 30s and 40s or?
It was, well, I was born in 1932.
Okay.
So most of my youth was spent during World War II.
Uh-huh.
These significant memories and stuff.
Well, so what was your childhood like?
Well, it was a nice childhood. Moving around affected me. We moved every year or so. My father was in the Navy. Uh, and as do many young people, I resented that and I resented losing my friends so regularly and so on. And it all came to ill. I was uh, at one point, I think in the 8th grade, I was put ahead a year. And not only was I with strangers, but I was not, although I was intellectually uh, up with and ahead of them, I was emotionally well behind. And so it caused a lot of difficulty for me in later years.
Like what? Like how was it difficult?
Well, I got in a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
Uh, the only thing that kind of kept me sane was playing football or everything and doing sports, boxing and whatnot. And but I was depressed. I became more depressed and so on. And so during my 20s, I had a difficult 20s and 30s. I had a difficult time. But these things evanesce, disappear in a puff of smoke.
But what was happening when you were in the 8th grade? Were you getting in fights or how?
Yes,
Oh.
that's what I was doing.
Oh.
And I hurt people and stuff that made me feel bad in later years. Why are you asking me this crap?
I don't know. I'm just trying to get good stuff for the interview. I want to know about your life.
Oh,
Well, I don't. What happened in your 20s and 30s though? Because of what had happened in 8th grade.
well, I had I drank alcoholically. I became uh, depressed. I had a nervous breakdown uh, while I was in the Foreign Service. I was a Foreign Service officer at that time. And I had in graduate school, it was just crazy. I went to graduate school at Berkeley in English, and what are you doing?
Sorry, I'm just logging in to make sure it's still working. Okay, you went to graduate school in Berkeley in English.
What, dear?
You went to graduate school in Berkeley for
Yeah,
English?
yeah, and uh, things just got worse and worse. I was teaching at the University of Victoria in Canada, and I just blew apart, and
Because it was stressful?
No, because I was stressed, not
Yeah.
because it was necessarily very stressful. I just wasn't capable of conducting the life that I was leading, you know.
Uh-huh. Okay, well, so anyway, what I'm trying, the overarching theme of this interview is about like political activism
Well, yeah,
and
that's
social
what I
activism,
thought.
you know? Yeah. Well, I just want to get a full idea of your life too, Grandpa.
Oh,
But,
well, then, you know, I quit teaching. I went to work as a stagehand. I was very, very happy doing that.
wow, so wait, why did you quit teaching? Just because you had this breakdown?
Well, I was a fuck up, and uh, why did I quit teaching? I quit teaching because I didn't like it. I didn't like going to meetings. I didn't like dealing with fools, people I thought were fools. They weren't, of course. But that's and on the other hand, I loved working with my hands.
Yeah.
I'd always loved being physical and so on, and I became very happy.
So how old were you when you quit teaching and started doing
Well,
staging?
about 35.
Yeah. So it was like a total career change.
What?
It was a total career change. And up till
A
then,
total.
yeah. Up till then, you had just been like an academic, like you had gotten degrees and gone to graduate school and then just become a
Yeah,
teacher.
yeah. I was. That's what I was. I was a child of the Depression, and Depression people, Depression children, all had an exaggerated notion of what achievement was and what it meant to be successful.
Uh-huh.
And I thought the thing to do was to go as far as I could academically because had some gift for doing that, and go as far as I could, and that would be success. Well, it wasn't. It was I was unhappy, and I just wasn't born to be a scholar. You know, I could teach okay, and I could write stuff that needed to be written, but I didn't make me happy. So as I say, when I started working as a stagehand, and my life changed.
Yeah.
That's all.
So anyway, um, what like I mean, do you consider yourself an activist? Or did you?
I did when I was in Berkeley.
Yeah.
I was a graduate student during the most intense stuff during the days of Mario Savio and free speech movement.
Who's Mario Savio?
Well, Mario Savio was a gifted speaker who made a famous speech in which he said, "There comes a time when we must throw our bodies upon the gears and cogs of the machine in order to bring it to a halt." So he didn't say exactly that, but it was very inspiring. We were talking about free speech and free speech on campus and what people could say and not say, and limitations the university had the right to impose upon students and so on. It was very exciting,
Yeah.
a very exciting time. And that was succeeded by riots and so on, which had the net negative result of bringing the fucking hippies to Telegraph Avenue and destroying what was once a lovely university community and turning it into filth and degradation.
How was it destroyed?
Well, the Berkeley was once an intellectual center. You go in a coffee shop or bookstore on Telegraph Avenue, and you can engage in serious intellectual conversation about anything. And that's what went on here. Serious love of music, serious love of serious music, and books and politics, and the life of the mind was paramount. After the riots and so on, the life of the sensory apparatus was paramount. Getting high, getting laid, these things that became the chief values of not necessarily of Berkeley students, but of the hangers-on around the Berkeley students, and a lot of criminality, and all that arose after the years of activism. It was quite. All change can be unpleasant. This change was particularly unpleasant to me, although I participated gladly in the excitement of the political movements. I loved being active. I loved unions. I'd always been a union member since I was just a young kid,
What unions?
15 or 16. I belonged to the Steelworkers Union, the Culinary Workers Union, the Longshoremen's Union, at various times, and I was pretty left wing. I worked for a year out at after the Navy. I worked for a year out at a place called the Continental Can Company, and there were a lot of socialist, left-winger, young activists, but working people out there, and I liked and admired them, and I liked hanging around with them. They helped formulate my political attitudes that I maintain, many of which I maintain today. So, all of those things made me very sympathetic to the student movement.
And this was while you were a graduate student, though. What year was that?
It must have been about 1960 or 59.
How were you involved in those movements, though?
Well, there were 2 or 3 levels of involvement. There were people who went around and devoted their life to this. And then there were people who were part-timers, sort of. I don't really mean that. I mean they were part-timers in the sense that they were seriously doing something else, usually going to school, and had a hard time it's hard to be a full-time activist and a full-time student. So at one extreme, many part-time activists, as I'm now calling them, were just jerks who came out during the news time, just before the news broadcast, I don't know, 3 o'clock or something like that. There'd be television cameras over and people would act up for them. Start threatening the police or something, get tear gas thrown at them. It was all very phony baloney.
Yeah.
And then the third level was people who were serious about it, but also, as many of us were, married with families and going to school and working, many people, and graduate students, we were teaching assistants or whatnot. We did things like write letters. We wrote op-ed thing for the New York Times, and we wrote a lot. We would be present at the big gathering, big events, and because I was so physical a person, so active and strong and so on, I felt very protective toward these young kids that were getting gassed and bopped with nightsticks and whatnot. And I would try to help them out, get in trouble with the cops and stuff. What'd you ask me?
Just how you are involved.
Well, so my involvement was in some ways a bit passive, and in some ways active, because I was in the English department, and like all the rest of the people, I could write well. So I wrote a lot of editorials and stuff, or letters to the editor, or whatever was required. And I attended just as another anonymous supporter in these big protest events that went on, where usually we were, we'd get gassed and stuff. So and I did a lot. I helped a lot of people who were afraid, who had been gassed and panicked about it and crap. I'd take them into the theater where I was working and let them wash their face and wash their eyes out and stuff. And I guess I was part of a group of English graduate students, all of whom were very supportive of what was going on. Although not all English graduate students were, many who weren't. But my friends were.
What were you guys fighting for exactly?
Well, it varied, but essentially the university made the claim, asserted the legal principle of in loco parentis, that is, It's an old doctrine that says, I have the right to control your behavior because I'm acting in place of your parents in loco parentis. Well, those of us who spent time in the military and were experienced in a variety of different ways, and afraid not.
But the university, where was that written? How did they like claim that right?
Well, Clark Kerr was the chancellor who did that, asserted that. Whether or not he used that phrase in loco parentis, I don't remember. But it was commonly held that that was the doctrine according to which he claimed jurisdiction over the students' behavior, particularly their speech behavior on campus. I was furious about that, and was very active in opposing that kind of thing.
How was that enforced on the campus?
Well, the cops would come and tell people to shut up.
If what? If you were...
If they, I think, I could be wrong about this, but it seems to me in at least one case, because they were speaking vehemently against the university administration. In general, the doctrine of in loco parentis had its biggest effect on the effort to disband gatherings up in Sproul Plaza, with speakers and loudspeakers and all kinds of talk that didn't please the administration. And one of the interesting side effects of our behavior, of the behavior of students at that time, was to enrage the governor, Ronald Reagan. He was a genuine half-wit, and he didn't really get many things, You have to lie to make him look smart, I'll tell you that. And so, no, his anger began before he was elected. After he was elected, he began attacking the structure of the university and did so successfully. The whole university system, the colleges and the university changed because of changes that he made. The state colleges had been administratively sort of inferior to the university. The money went to the university and the research and all that stuff. And Reagan thought that by increasing the power of the state colleges, he would diminish the power of the university, and that worked. He just called them all universities. The State University of California at Hayward and shit like that. Whereas before they had been colleges. And we Americans have a death grip on on our identity and our dignity as they attach to names. So that happened, but more important, the university had, since its inception, it was a land grant college. You know what that means. Abraham Lincoln looked around and saw what was happening at the railroads. Were getting millions and millions and millions of acres of federal land for nothing. And he said, you're going to be required to start a university in each state. And so most of the great state universities began as land-grant colleges, Ohio State, Michigan State, and California. So Cal was the land-grant college here, and as a consequence of that, its administrative structure was separate from the state legislature. That is, they operated their own budget. And the legislature either gave them the money or they didn't give them the money, but they always gave them the money they needed. Reagan stopped that. He made all of the universities, the state colleges, as well as the university, compete for a pot of money, and the legislature, quarreled with details of this and that in a way that they never had. They entered then into academic matters of which they were utterly ignorant. They didn't know what the hell they were talking about. And all of these things together damaged the university. The university's reputation has, since that day, been diminished.
But how did putting money into the state schools decrease the power of UC Berkeley?
Well, there's a pot of money, and UC always got the lion's share. When they had to share among all the state colleges, the pot of money was smaller for Berkeley and UCLA and so on.
So the students who were active in political movements just were heard less, or how did that affect the activism?
No, the activism was pretty well ended by then. And it was pretty much in the hands of the police, the highway patrol, and the sheriff's office. Because the Berkeley City Police just wouldn't be tough enough, didn't beat up enough people.
So you guys had been speaking out against the university trying to control what you were saying, but what have you been saying that they were trying to control?
Well, at the most childish level, they wanted to control people's use of obscenity in public. What the hell are you doing?
What? Nothing.
What are you wiping on my blanket?
I wiped a little snot.
Is it snot?
A little bit.
On my blanket?
I wiped my nose a little bit on your blanket. Okay.
And Is that water on your nose? No, it's not.
We have water.
Get it?
Sort of.
So, Reagan really damaged the university permanently. And he damaged higher education in California. I would say that UC Berkeley, in my opinion, was the best and the most highly thought of all the land-grant colleges in the country.
Well, it still is, you know.
What?
It still is. It's the best one in the country.
Maybe. But anyway,
But what had you guys been opposing at that school when you guys were having riots?
well, the well, I guess it was a series. It began with the free speech movement in the 60s, the late 60s. Mario Savio.
What was the free speech movement?
Well, it was about the right to speak on any political issue and to use any language that we wanted to.
Had that been threatened?
What?
Had that right been threatened?
What?
Had that right been threatened?
Yes, by use of the doctrine of in loco parentis.
Oh, I see.
And then it grew. When we saw that the opposition was almost entirely people close to what we now call the Tea Party, that encouraged us to do more. Because, see, we weren't very long past the McCarthy period, where the university had been humiliated by the loyalty oath and other things that have now been kind of forgotten. And where individuals were humiliated, individual faculty members signed this loyalty oath despite their hatred of it, out of fear of losing their jobs. And I don't think they ever quite got over that. I mean, it was so cowardly a thing. Whether or not they were justified in doing it is an entirely different matter. They must have felt inside their heart they'd done a bad thing by signing that lying oath. That wasn't very long in the past. That was in the mid-50s.
What was that oath?
It was an oath saying, "I am not now, nor have I ever been, a communist."
Oh.
It was that, McCarthy, the McCarthy period.
So.
And he was the first Tea Party guy. And he was a dickhead through and through, just solid dick all the way. Let's see what else.
So you guys.
Oh, I want to say this.
Okay.
Student activism is not new, wasn't invented. Hello. Was not invented here. You know what the Goliardic poems are?
No.
Well, they were a bunch of young students studying for the priesthood, because it was the Middle Ages. But there were real fuck-ups. I mean, they sang dirty songs, and they attacked their teachers. And they drank constantly. I'm just saying this. There is in youth at the moment when they're looking at entering what is sometimes called the adult world, when rebellion is perfectly natural. They hate what's been going on, they know they can do it better, and so on. And that usually goes on between the ages of 18 and 28, something like that. And it goes on all over the world. In Japan, students all become communists. Well, I don't really know that they all do, but many students become communists. They riot, they shut down airports, they do all kinds of stuff. And then they graduate and they take a job with a corporation where they plan to stay for their whole life, you know. And they're doing exactly what their society requires of them. So this has been going on for a long time. It has in the past, say in the 30s, taken the form of public drunkenness, of riots or fistfights over these with Stanford about the axe and stuff. But as we have become more and more a part of the world, the greater world beyond the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, our protests have come to resemble theirs. Political, sometimes violent or a little bit violent, kind of candy-ass version of violence. And
you mean you personally, or
what?
you personally, or your generation? Or?
No, in general, in America, that's what's been going on since the 60s and 70s.
Okay.
And I'm also trying to explain the 60s and 70s to you by saying these things. So that students go through a kind of obligatory left-wing period. Now, because, as you know, the left in this country is made up very largely of well-educated people, to put it, the Republicans talk about the left coast, meaning we are to the left here, but we're also much better educated than the rest of the country. And the same in New England, in the Washington corridor, down to D.C., people hold education at a higher evaluation in general. So, students are being taught how to be decent left-wingers. Thank goodness. And I'm all for it. Although some people find out just by working the work, and you find out, oh, I'm working for a stupid person, and they make a lot more money than I do. That doesn't seem right.
Well, did you ever feel personally that your involvement like made a difference, or what was your personal experience?
Uh, I felt very excited by the opportunity or the possibility of changing things that I didn't like. I felt excited by the issue of the changing the authoritarianism of the university. Um, but mostly I felt excited when there'd be mobs of 1,000 people and a whole bunch of cops and tear gas. I just liked that,
Why?
I don't know, because it was violent, and or it could have been, could be violent. And I could help people. Don't cry, dear.
Were you guys ever fighting issues that were on a larger scale outside of just regarding Cal, like larger political issues?
Well, we did. Everything I haven't said to you, but it's true. Everything sort of centered on the Vietnam War. Is that we differed from the power structure in opposing that war very violently.
Uh-huh.
There was a time when I was on a march down Adeline Street, down Shattuck, down Adeline, over toward Emeryville, when a couple of hundred Hells Angels showed up. And they were going to stop us because they supported the war. But the cops separated the two groups. It didn't amount to anything. But gradually, the Hells Angels came to oppose the war. So a year or two later, we marched together. I don't like the Hells Angels, nor do I want to march with them. But we were representatives of a social change that was nationwide, society-wide, and that was this growing opposition to the war in Vietnam. The students were the leaders in that change. And as you know, within a fairly short time, the nation agreed with us. I had just left the Foreign Service. I knew more about the Vietnam War than most people did. And I met regularly once a week with guys who were intelligence officers who had been sent to school at Berkeley to study stuff, and other government officials who were out or out temporarily, or like me, and just left. We'd meet regularly and have really interesting talks about what was going on in the early days of Vietnam. And we all came to oppose the war. Although we had different points of view at the beginning, we came to oppose the war. And I think I probably influenced a large number of people because I gave talks, either at people's houses or...
Like lectures?
What?
Lectures or
Well,
speeches?
yeah. Well, maybe I talk like I'm talking now. Is this a lecture?
No.
Yeah. Anyway, the point is that how come you're supposed to put in your password?
Oh, it just shut down because it's why it's
Okay,
sitting there.
so
So then what happened ultimately?
well, listen, one of the things that happened is the Reagan position, the hatred of self-expression, the hatred of the left became very widespread. There was actually a reaction to the 60s. Anything that reminded people of the 60s or hippiedom or stuff like dope caused violent reaction
From who?
for years. Well, I would say the majority of people in America. That is to say, I think it's why Nixon was elected. I think you could not associate yourself with that whole student movement. And I would say this. I would say that the Tea Party is a result of that.
Did you associate yourself with that movement though?
Yeah, I still do. Even though when I was thinking about it, I realized I hate a lot of it. I hate a lot of the self-indulgence and crap, but
Like what?
like the excuses people make for bad behavior. Like now they're looking for a reason for the guy in Boston that blew people up. Well, did he have a bad childhood when he emigrated? I'm exaggerating, but the need to find out motive is almost always illusory. First, we don't know the goddamn motives of people. Second, the psychological motive is often utterly irrelevant. Who cares? Who cares why they blew people up? I don't care. It's the fact of what their actions are what are important here. Well, I'm characterizing the left as the excuse finders. And that's what we do. The negative side of that, however, is they're also blame finders. Oh, yeah, well, the 9/11, well, that was caused by the government. They blew up the buildings. Just real craziness, real intellectual irresponsibility.
Was that sort of thing going on during those riots?
No, I would say that I'm talking about the way in which these tendencies became important and have entered our lives every day. So,
Those tendencies became important at that time, or
what?
those tendencies?
Became important at that
no,
time,
no,
or what do you
no.
mean?
They're part of human nature.
Uh-huh.
It's just that, they're now emphasized, and I think the emphasis derives from those days. And I'm saying some things I don't like about the left.
Okay.
Now the right is worse. That is, but they blame it all on aliens or flying saucers or some damn thing. I don't know what.
Uh-huh.
And on us, people like us.
Was there ever a point where all of that activism and that opposition culminated and there was some sort of climax? Or
No, it just got more and more diluted. Not necessarily so much in terms of tactics, but diluted. A movement like this has to have a focus, a sharp, sharp focus. And the focus kept fading so that rather than the passion of righteousness and justification, there arose just the general feeling of political correctness, which is nothing. Political correctness is nothing. It's probably the fault of the goddamn women in the feminist movement. They said, oh, they're so bad, they don't give women equal pay. And the reason I'm making fun is this. You can't do everything. You can't save the fucking kitty cats on the street. And the doggy cats. And you can't save all the children. And you can't attack all the bad people. And you can't stop smoking, and you can't stop drinking, and you can't get rid of all the gun owners, and you can't do everything. You have to focus. And I see in the left now less focus. Obama has brought us together because of the racism around him, the hatred of him on the basis of his race. And we sort of have this as a collective issue, the left does. But what the heck?
what?
Well, you're using half a roll of
I'll
toilet paper.
Bring you more. I'm really sick.
You're very sick.
I'm a little sick.
Oh, I'm sorry. What are you allergic to?
I don't know, pollen or flowers or dust.
Maybe something out there.
Probably. But anyway, so what you think happened is that, do you have opposition to the feminist movement, or?
I oppose the feminist movement. I support the feminist movement on all of the objective issues: equal pay, abortion, freedom from physical violence. I support all that. I do not support the political correctness. I don't support people who refuse to use male or female pronouns. I think that's crazy. I think something's the matter with their brain. You can't say his or hers.
So do you think that political correctness diffused that free speech movement?
No, I think that's one of many roots that were taken from that root, from that beginning. Um, I don't want you to think this is the first left movement. I mean, the Union movement began in 1885 in this country.
Uh-huh.
Uh, and they were killed by the thousands. Uh, there was a lot of devotion, dedication involved in that, or we wouldn't have had unions at all. And we might have to go through a period like that again, because unions are being gotten, people getting, these rich guys getting rid of unions. Um,
So it wasn't
that is to say,
it wasn't the first leftist movement.
it wasn't the first, and and the revolution against the English was of this kind. The Civil War had much of this in it, unfortunately.
But I'm just wondering what happened, how it died out.
Well, I'd say it's been diluted. The voices of the left have either become muted or irrelevant very often. Now it's different, as I say. Obama changed things. The well, maybe the central fact can be seen in the gun law. We won't change them because of the money. That's all. Everyone agrees, all the voters want to change. All of the rich guys want to keep it the same. So, it's our cowardice in lying down in front of them and continuing to re-elect these cowardly government and legislative officials.
Is that what happened then?
Well, no, I think it's a tendency that's happened. I suppose another issue is the public's view of the federal government. I don't remember the guy's name, the governor of Texas, who speaks regularly about the need for small government. That too much government is intrusive in our lives. But they blew up that factory down there, and the first call he made was to for federal help, federal money. It's the hypocrisy of it all is so vast. That is, we want less government, we don't want government, we only want government's help and money. It's crazy. And there is a lot of craziness about politics now. I would say that I would urge you to read a book called The American Nation, in which the roots of these attitudes are traced to the original group of settlers who came to a region. I'm not going to go into the book, but much of what we're seeing is the working out of historical patterns. Um, and this insanity of the Tea Party,
Yeah.
and it's part of a historical pattern. It's never been quite. It has been 150 years since it was this bad. It was when there was a group called the Know Nothing Party. Okay, that's all I have to say.
For the whole interview?
Aren't we done?
Yeah, we could be done.
Well, what do you want to know?
Well, I just would like to know when you felt like you were no longer involved in that movement, or what you felt like happened, like came from your guys' efforts.
I went away. I moved up to Canada. You know, I took my family up there. I had a job. I was working. I wasn't near Berkeley. We would talk about these things. The English guys were very, very interested in it. But it wasn't part of my life. There was no way it didn't impinge on my life. I was teaching. We had a little farm up there. I had some horses. I took care of them. I had all the kids. I had 4 kids, you know.
And this was before you became a stagehand?
Yeah.
So when you would help like girls who had gotten tear gassed, you'd help them wash their face in the theater. What theater were you working in?
Zellerbach.
As a stagehand?
Yeah, it had just opened.
So did you move back to Berkeley and work as a stagehand and then continue in the riots, or?
I went back to Berkeley. Yeah, I continued writing, but I was the carpenter at Zellerbach. It just opened. A friend of mine was the manager, and he hired me. You know, because I was looking for work.
And so what was the end result with that movement?
Well, I've been trying to tell you that all this energy's going off in different directions.
I see. Where are you going?
Bathroom. Okay.
Okay, well we can be done.
Well, that's up to you. You could pause it or.